Hi, it's Kevin Lebates here, and today's video is about regulation. Those of you who follow me on LinkedIn will have seen that I've posted a number of posts about this issue recently. I'd like to start off by saying that in principle, I think that regulation is a good idea. However, in practice, it often leaves a lot to be desired. And therefore, I think the first thing worth looking at is what is the purpose of regulation? Now, most people will instinctively think that the idea behind regulation is to protect consumers, particularly in the financial world, to avoid cases of fraud, to give customers a way of getting compensation if something goes wrong, and then for the greater societal good, to prevent criminals and terrorists from acting. And I don't think many people would be against that. However, there is, of course, a secondary reason behind regulation, and one that is not so often discussed by the authorities, which is that it can be used to give large entities and incumbents in a financial space an advantage over newcomers. And so, for example, if you have a regulation that says that it is required to have €150,000 locked up in a bank account for no real purpose, ostensibly under the idea that it can be used to compensate customers or something like that, then you're using regulation to set a barrier to prevent certain groups, say small companies, individual people, from entering into that space and operating. And that way, regulation becomes a means of control to ensure that existing financial institutions have an advantage over newcomers. Another issue that I have with regulation is that I personally, anyway, believe it should be drafted to explain what the desired outcome is, and to leave the means whereby that can be achieved up to the individual organization, possibly providing guidelines to help. So an example of where this has gone wrong is the recent EU Data Act, Article 30, in fact, where the article concerns smart contracts and mandates that smart contracts contain a kill switch. Now, presumably the aim there is to provide a mechanism whereby if something goes wrong, current users of the smart contract and potential future users of the smart contract are protected. But there are numerous ways in which this can be achieved, and by specifying a particular way in which it is to be achieved, plus specifying it rather badly, the regulation loses any kind of advantage that it has for the consumer and the customers of smart contracts, provides a headache for smart contract developers, and ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, achieves very little. So we see this time and time again in regulation for crypto and for blockchain related stuff from the EU. The markets in crypto assets has the same problem. They specify how things should be done rather than what should be achieved. And I think that is where the core of the problem with EU regulation in this area currently lies. Anyway, it's still, technically speaking, early days in the regulation space. Hopefully, over time, these regulations will get better and will actually be put in place to protect individual citizens and not existing financial institutions. But we can only live in hope. That's it for today. I hope you found it interesting, and look out for future videos on this topic, because I think it is a very important and very interesting one. Bye for now.